I'm in the process of fitting the cylinder barrels to this BSA A65 engine, and I've actually got the pistons and the rings have entered the bores of the barrels already, but I'll just sort of go over what I've done here. And I started off obviously with I fitted the piston ring compressors, clamps, I've got rather sort of stout cable ties there which I can actually reuse, and I can prise them open with a thin flat bladed screwdriver. It'll just sort of pop the little ratchety tag open and I can remove them without cutting them. I've used them many times actually, those. But I fit the piston ring compressors so that the tops of them, this is just a piston out of something else for example, but so that the tops of them are just sort of down from the edge of the crown, not quite down to the top of the top ring, but just so they leave enough of the top of the piston proud to sort of locate them in the bottom of the cylinder bores as I offer the cylinder barrels up. And I've got, in the case of this A65, this works quite well, a bit of timber, and it's 2 inch wide by 1 inch deep, 2 by 1, and I've got the piston skirts resting on that. Now the only thing that you've got to watch with just having something in the middle is it can try to splay the pistons out on the gudgeon pins on the small ends, and then they don't line up nicely with the cylinder bores as you offer them up. So, but the advantage with wood is obviously there's a bit more sort of squash and grip in the wood than if you had, say, lots of people use spanners and things laid out, but this you can sort of get the pistons where you want them regarding their distance apart, and then just put a little bit of weight on them. I've got this spanner here just sort of holding some weight on them to just press them, not crush them into the wood, but just keep them firmly located on the wood so that they wouldn't slide about, and then they're perfectly positioned then for lowering the cylinder barrels. And as I say, you can see the gudgeon pin bosses there. Actually the rings are well into the bores, so what I've got to do next is just carefully unpick these cable ties and let the piston ring compressors go, and then I can let the cylinder barrels slide down even further, and then just carefully slip the timber away, and I can let the cylinder barrels go all the way home to the crankcase mouth, and hopefully the job will be a good one, as they say around here. Okay, well here we are with one partially rebuilt BSA A65 engine, and I've still got the primary side to build up and the timing side, the oil pumps and bits and bobs in there to do, and obviously fit the cylinder head and so on. But I've got the cylinder barrels fitted and bolted down tightly now, and this is a point in the process where I like to get the engine into the frame. I prefer it if I can to get the pistons and cylinder barrels fitted before I put the engine in the frame, because I can work on the bench, and it's easier if I need to slew the engine around a little bit when I'm lining piston rings up and feeding the cylinder barrels down over the pistons and so on. It's a bit more of a fiddle when you've got the engine in the frame, although it can be done. But also, without the primary side and the timing side built up, and minus the cylinder head and so on, the engine is still not too heavy. It is a heavy lump, but it's more manageable than if it was built up complete and then you try and put it in. So this is a stage of a rebuild on an A65 where I like to get the engine back into the frame, and vice versa. When I'm stripping one down, I usually strip them to this point before I lift them out, and it gives you, as well as a more manageable engine and a complete one, gives you a little bit more wiggle space in the frame if you need it to sort of position the engine where it needs to be more easily than if all the other bits and pieces are on it. So I'm ready to try and put the engine in the frame, and I won't be filming that because obviously I'll be using both hands and my best swear words possibly to get the engine in, but hopefully we'll come back to it when it's in position. and then I can consider carrying on with the rebuild. Just to add to the previous clip, I've just placed some blocks of wood underneath the engine to raise it relative to the rolling chassis and frame a little, and the engine at the moment is about at waist height to me, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to lower the bike lift down to its middle position. And that'll mean that when I get hold of the engine, I won't have to sort of try and lift it quite so high relative to my own height to place it in the frame, and hopefully it'll be less of a struggle. And obviously the blocks of wood will mean that I won't have to lift the engine up from such a low position as it would have been if I'd had it at bench level or surface level of the bike lift. So I'm ready now. I'm going to hopefully lift the engine into place, and it should be a fairly simple and comfortable operation, I hope. I thought I'd run into a little bit of an obstacle putting this A65 engine back together when I didn't realise at the time when I stripped it, but the rev counter drive off the oil pump was half broken. One of the lugs had gone, so I don't think that would have lasted very long before the other one possibly failed. And I thought, well, it's obviously been a recently added oil pump. It was obviously someone fitted that, perhaps in the hope of quietening down the noises that this engine made before, I don't know, but it's a high quality pump, that, an SRM one. But nevertheless, one of the ears or lugs for the rev counter drive had broken off that gear, and I thought, first off, I thought that's going to be a complete oil pump swap in order to overcome that, so perhaps I better just put it back together as it is and hope that the rev counter lasts a while and inform the owner. But then I remembered that I had an old worn out oil pump off another engine I worked on a few years ago, and I thought I'd have a look at it because there was a circlip in the end, and I got the circlip out, and sure enough the rev counter drive part of it came out. So what I did is I raided the old oil pump for its good rev counter drive, and I fitted that to this pump, and here's the old broken one out of harm's way. So I'm very happy with that, because that was something that would have bugged me a bit if I had to put the engine back together like that. So no worries on that score anymore, so that's good.